for an outline form, and as part of the application, it's seeking to establish the parameters in terms of the maximum building heights, the overall quantum of floor space, which is 200,000 square metres. Although the exact configuration of the buildings would be determined through subsequent reserved matters applications pursuant to that outline. So as we alluded to, phase one is submitted for in detail. So detailed consent is sought for a warehouse build of approximately 47,000 square metres. That's the area in yellow there at the southwestern corner of the site, just to the east of Islington, the road, which currently marks the eastern extent of Haldon's Parkway. The area in purple, I would call it pink, but it looks more purple there to me, is where the other commercial buildings or any other commercial buildings which receive consent, were this to be approved, would be provided along with associated parking, circulation space, and related development there, including other ancillary buildings. The green areas are for landscaping around the perimeter of the site, and the yellow area with the red hatched line towards the northern boundary is where it's proposed to create a pedestrian link as part of the proposals as well. There are some other areas in the triangular area to the northeast, which is to provide enhanced habitat as well, and not that's separate from the mitigation land which I referred to earlier within the blue line. And there's also an area for on-site drainage, predominantly surface water drainage, which I think is fairly obvious there at the top of the page. Not the most inspiring picture, but that's pretty much how the proposed warehouse would be laid out. We have details of how it sits within the plot, and there are other details as well, but essentially a large warehouse with office space around the edge of the site, around the edge of the building, fit for purpose ultimately as a distribution unit. There has been some discussion about how it would look from the outside. Essentially, this is an older plan submitted, as originally submitted in February 2022, showing the northern and southern elevations, the longer ones, as it's orientated broadly east-west. It's since been superseded by the following, or this picture, this elevation, I should say, which has this more pixelated approach, something which was raised in consultation by the relevant design advisors. This limits or improves how the building would appear visually, and is considered to be an improvement on what was originally submitted. So that was the previous configuration of how it would appear on the east and western extents as well, so not much change there. And again, to reflect the theme, the other image at the bottom of the page is effectively a section showing the height of the building. You probably can't see there, but it would be up to 24.5 metres tall. As I mentioned, ancillary structures. The only other building applied for in detail is the gatehouse, which is, again, probably fairly standard and fairly limited in scale compared to the main warehouse building. That would be positioned, obviously, at the entrance to the plot, close to the new site access. I mentioned that the remaining area aside the part in the southwestern corner is being applied for in outline form, so the exact configuration of that has yet to be determined or wouldn't be determined through part of this initial application, but this indicative master plan has been provided showing the possible configuration in the form of 4 large warehouses with associated parking, so it does give an idea of how the site could be developed and potentially would be developed, although that is clearly, with the exception of plot 1 or unit 1, a matter for subsequent determination should the principles be established and during the initial appeal against non-determination. That image also provides an idea of the extent of some of the landscaping around all margins of the site, really, but most crucially the bund towards the north to provide some visual mitigation, plenty of planting along there, and along the east and western sides as well. The area outside of that site in the blue, or edged in blue there, is what's referred to as functionally linked land. And this would be the subject of management practices and initiatives to enhance the area to ensure it provides mitigation for any potential loss of habitat for protected bird species, the golden plover and lapwing. The details of this have been agreed with Natural England and would be secured through a legal agreement, the details of which have been subject of detailed discussion and would be subject to further scrutiny during the appeal process. Slightly more abstract, but this shows the site in context and the location of some of the highways improvement works, which would be carried out off-site to facilitate improvements to and from that new development area, principally to the A605 Oundle Road junction further to the north, as shown circled in orange there, the Huntingdon Road roundabout, where it joins the A605 further south in blue, and of course junction 13 of the A14. These works have all been agreed in terms of the form and extent with the respective highways authorities, including the local highway authority, North Northamptonshire Council, and Highways England. Sorry, National Highways, that's right. They keep changing. Right, and so on to the assessment of the application. Conscious that there have been, even if it's not fully, the detail of all haven't been fully reported in terms of what's been submitted and the full details of what has been provided by all contributors, but aware of the large volume of objections, as well as some letters of support as well from the many participants in the process. So the primary consideration is the development plan policies, which are found predominantly or the relevant ones are predominantly those in the North Northamptonshire Joint Core Strategy, which adopted in July 2016. There's extensive references to these in the officer report, but principally it's Policy 11, Policy 23 and Policy 24, which relate to the network of urban and rural centres, that may also be referred to at times as the spatial strategy. Policy 23 is a distribution of new jobs, and Policy 24 specifically in relation to logistics and development within that sector. Also of considerable relevance is the National Planning Policy Framework, the NPPF. And whilst the development plan policies referenced, those in the joint core strategy are the starting point for consideration of all applications according to planning law, and they must be adhered to unless material considerations indicate otherwise. The NPPF is a significant material planning policy consideration, and carries significant weight in the assessment of this, particularly given that this version was published as recently as December 2024, representing a fully up-to-date statement of national planning policy and the government's objectives. We are aware in assessing the application that the Council's policy team provided a written objection to the proposed development. That was in August 2024, before the publication, obviously, of the latest version of the NPPF. And at that time, less weight could be afforded to the new policies and provisions within the framework, the NPPF, as it's sometimes referred to as the framework, or we tend to use that shorthand in planning speak, I guess. Nonetheless, in assessing the application, it must be acknowledged that there are and remain these key conflicts with areas of development plan policy. It's important to consider whether the policies remain relevant, having been adopted in 2016, or more specifically, whether they could be considered out of date for the purposes of decision making. And if they are, what weight should be afforded to them, or would this be reduced below the full weight which they would normally be attributed, or which would normally be attributed to them. The key policies, notably Policy 11 and Policy 24, seek to locate large-scale logistics and distribution premises to the growth towns in North Northamptonshire rather than market town locations such as Thrapston. So in that respect, the policy is clear as to where this seeks to direct for larger scale, such as this development. But despite some assertions to the contrary, development plan policies are not considered out of date, but it must be acknowledged that the evidence submitted as part of this application, and which will be considered at the appeal and may be bolstered by further submissions, makes a very strong case that there are specific needs of the logistics sector which are not being adequately provided for, either in qualitative or quantitative terms, to the degree which is required by the market. Key areas where the appellant's evidence weighs heavily in favour of the finding that the needs of the prospective occupiers of Unit 1 and indeed of the wider sector are not being provided for include the prescriptive approach of the policies under joint core strategy which seek to direct development to the growth towns. And in the views or has been submitted, this does not necessarily reflect the role of a strategic network or the importance of a strategic road network as a key determinant of the relative attractiveness of these locations for this form of development. The appellants have argued that the use of a general target figure for growth in jobs in North Northamptonshire does not properly reflect the need for policies to take full account of market signals as the national planning policy framework requires. These important factors, which are assuming greater and greater importance, include the take-up rates within similar locations, take-up rates in employment land, I should say, net absorption rates, which is a term used to describe the demand for that type of floor space, and the rental levels which are being achieved for that form of development as well. All of those, the evidence suggests, are notably high, both within North Northamptonshire and within the wider South East Midlands sub-region, which is often referred to within the industry and elsewhere, by the looks of it, as the golden triangle for logistics operations. So, in other words, it's highly attractive locations for storage and distribution hubs, as is evidenced, I think, by the demand the signs of demand which have been provided. So with the evidence that has been provided, that indicates that the demand for floor space is far outstripping the supply, and there's also the growth in rental levels as a proxy of that, with occupiers competing for available stock in locations that the market is seeking this provision. Principally, the A14 corridor is one where there's been particular attraction to the market, notwithstanding the fact that other sites have been fully developed elsewhere. The appellants have assessed the sites elsewhere in North Northamptonshire and discounted those which would not provide for the operational requirements of the prospective occupier. A key factor in that is the height of the buildings permitted, which at less than 21 metres are evidently a key factor which limits their attractiveness to modern logistics operators. In other words, fails to achieve the efficiencies which they would otherwise need to achieve, and would, by virtue of that, often require larger floor areas and bigger buildings. So, in that sense, they are seeking to achieve those efficiencies with higher buildings as well along those lines. Anyway. A great deal of detail has been provided within their supporting evidence submitted, which is referred to in the officer's report, and at great length in the many documents submitted as part of the application. Returning to some of those points, there's generally considered to be an underestimate of demand relative to the supply, and the weight of evidence suggests that failure to respond to the market and the needs of the market is potentially hampering the support which the planning system should be affording to the growth in jobs in the logistics sector, particularly with that being a key priority of this area as well. And by virtue of that, constraining the supply of premises and by extension job growth. On the basis of the high take-up rates, high net absorption and demand, and high rental levels, which are the market signals the NPPF requires us to take full account of, or the planning system to take full account of, on the basis that they're not being properly met or provided for by the planning system, it is suggested that the allocation of land within North Northamptonshire for logistics development is insufficient, and the evidence points to that being the case, and that there is, as a result, there is unmet need which needs to be provided for in attractive locations. Otherwise, potential investment, it's alleged, will go elsewhere, and the economic growth opportunities such as these will be lost. These factors, which represent significant, or potentially represent significant socio-economic benefits, are, as a result, significant material considerations which, on balance, give considerable weight against the policy presumption against growth and against the location of this type of development at market towns, and the need to focus solely on the growth towns. Not that the growth towns shouldn't be the focus of development, just that it shouldn't necessarily be limited to those locations given the constraints to supply. In addition to those points about the principle of development, which is essentially, is there a need for this, and how does that outweigh the policy position in policies 11, 23 and 24 primarily, it's necessary to consider other detailed technical matters as well. Clearly, development of this size has the potential to have an impact on the landscape and have visual impacts. Obviously, we shared some pictures of the latest or the established proposed designs in terms of the type of building and the elevational treatments which will be under consideration by the planning inspector at the appeal. A key plank of the evidence submitted as part of the application and the subsequent appeal is a landscape and visual assessment which has assessed the impact of the proposals on the landscape, primarily from public vantage points. I've selected the key, or some of the key views where it would be most visible, just to demonstrate what we'd be looking at. So this is from Islington, close to where the site access would be provided for, just to the east of this. Unfortunately, it doesn't show the most up-to-date elevations, but it does show or provide a pretty good indication of how the building would look relative to the undeveloped state it's currently in. And it also gives us an opportunity to show how that would look when the proposed planting around the margins matures. So that's once the vegetation around the margins matures, probably after a period of around 15 years, we think, on that one. Further north along Islington is another vantage point, the undeveloped state, and how the buildings would appear on the landscape are shown in these images. And again, with some planting around the margins, softens the appearance of the buildings and provides a degree of mitigation against some of the visual impacts from along those roads. Another view, we're getting closer to Titchmarsh now, slightly further to the north, but again, looking south this time towards where the buildings will be positioned. The current building would appear on the landscape there. And with the planting along the northern extent, it would again soften its appearance. For completeness, or for a bit more comprehensive look at it, now that's looking from Polo Pit, that might be how you pronounce it, apologies if it's not, looking further west to where the existing Holden's Parkway is in the background there. So it comes a little bit closer, comes right up to this, so that's how it would look, and then with the mitigation, the
could the gallery please let the officer speak? Thank you.
That's probably the majority of the visual stuff I have for you, unfortunately. But as I say, those do provide an indication of how it's been modelled and how we expect or anticipate the buildings would appear in the landscape at the various stages. So it's not disputed that there would be some change and that some of those buildings would appear and would remain visible despite the planting around the margins. I think that a key consideration is the extent of that visual impact and how it impacts on receptors, though, I think. So largely from those vantage points, the site would generally be glimpsed from the roadways. Well, I appreciated that some of them would be public footpaths, particularly those further to the north. But of course, undoubtedly, the most sensitive locations would be in Titchmarsh itself, approximately 1 kilometre to the north. Given that the landscape and visual assessment has concluded there's a general absence of visual harm directly related to the landscape itself, and an absence of harm to the environment in the form of noise, air quality, light pollution, as assessed by the Council's environmental protection officers, who, if there are any specific queries, might be able to assist with those. It's considered that the impacts on landscape and amenity are generally limited or can be effectively mitigated, subject to the measures, including the planting, being put in place to the degree that they've been shown on the submitted plans. In terms of highways, specialist officers are also able to advise about the accessibility and the highways impacts on the local and the strategic highway network, and can provide perhaps more detail if there are any questions in relation to those. But in summary, there are no technical objections to the proposals on highways grounds, either from the local highways authority, North Northants Council, or National Highways, subject to those mitigation measures, including the junction improvements shown earlier on, being implemented. There are conditions which have been proposed to ensure that those are delivered in advance of the development taking place, or at certain trigger points, and that the provision of public transport enhancements is also secured via a legal agreement. In relation to flood risk and drainage, another key technical matter, the lead local flood authority have advised that there are no issues in relation to drainage, either foul or surface water. While Anglian Water, having initially objected or raised concerns about the capacity of the local water recycling centre, now have no objection or removed that objection based on an alternative point of connection being provided. That would again be provided for with suitable mechanisms in the form of conditions and legal agreements as required. In terms of ecology and biodiversity, it's notable that this application was submitted in 2022 prior to the requirement in the Environment Act, which now requires a 10% uplift in biodiversity, or biodiversity net gain as it's often referred to, prior to that coming into effect. So due to the timing of that being submitted, it is not a mandatory consideration. There would nonetheless be measures put in place, notably the area to the northeast of the main developable part of the site, which would result in significant enhancements to the biodiversity level of what's currently being provided. So that area is specifically set aside for that purpose, to enhance what's currently farmland and to ensure that there is some uplift achieved there. The impact of the proposals on habitats and protected species has been a key consideration and the subject of extensive discussions between the applicant, appellant, and the relevant consultees. Key amongst those is Natural England. And as a result, a habitats regulations assessment has been undertaken by Essex County Council's Place Services, who have the requisite expertise to do so on behalf of Northamptonshire Council. This has ultimately concluded that appropriate mitigation measures can be secured and provided to compensate for any impact on protected species, and due to the proximity of the special protection areas further to the west and northwest. The functionally linked land, which was referred to, is just to the north of the site there, as was shown in the blue line on an earlier slide, is designed to provide the required mitigation and has been a key element of the discussions with Natural England, who are the statutory consultee charged with ensuring that the relevant obligations of a developer are met in providing for that. And hence a strategy has been prepared, and the requirements of that will be the subject of a legal agreement, which will no doubt take up quite a lot of time during the appeal against non-determination process. The draft is currently, or elements of that are currently in draft and subject to further consideration. We are aware of the rebuttal to the habitats regulations assessment provided by Staunch. And advice has been received relatively recently subsequent to that from Place Services primarily. And it is our understanding, based on that advice, that whilst there has been legitimate reference to some in-combination effects which have yet to be fully considered of this and other proposals, it's not necessarily a full requirement for those to be fully taken into account at this stage. Those are only required to be fully assessed during that process when they receive planning consent. So they're slightly hypothetical at the moment as to whether consent will be approved for those. Then only firm proposals or fully approved proposals are required to be taken account in that cumulative assessment. So the current situation with regard to the impacts in terms of ecology and the natural environment are that Natural England are supportive of the proposal, subject to the required mitigation packages being secured, as detailed in the Habitats Regulations Assessment, and they'll be secured through the planning obligations and the legal agreement. So we're pleased to hear I'm coming to summarise the assessment of the application. So in light of the above, and notwithstanding the departures from the spatial strategy and the acknowledged conflict with policy 11 of the development plan, the evidence submitted by the applicant, or the appellant in this case, has been the subject of considerable assessment and consideration by the local planning authority. And following all that, it is clear that there remains, and it has been demonstrated, that there's a strong and persistent demand for the type of logistics facility proposed here, which cannot necessarily be met by existing commitments provided for by the planning process in the form of allocations elsewhere in North Northamptonshire. The presence of those allocated sites and locations which may reflect, or better reflect, the spatial hierarchy, the spatial strategy or the settlement hierarchy as set out in the development plan, should not necessarily prevent the proposed development from being considered acceptable. That's according to the direction provided by the MPPF, and provided that the appellant or the applicant has demonstrated or provided evidence that there are no suitable alternative sites to meet the identified need in terms of the short or longer term requirements for this type of building or wider development. And as such, those represent material considerations which can be afforded weight in decision making, which could be concluded as outweighing the policies in the development plan, particularly given their age. The weight of evidence, including that supplied by the applicants, therefore suggests the need and scale exists, which is not readily available to prospective operators, and it's clear that there is a named potential occupier for Unit 1 as shown there. So there is clear demand for something of a bespoke nature, for which the detail has been provided. So the commitments in terms of the other permitted schemes and allocated sites elsewhere in the district do not necessarily provide for all the projected need or those specific requirements. And so that unmet need can be afforded significant weight in the view of the local planning authority in the determination of the application, or at least a recommendation in that respect. Given the scale of the investment and the employment created through the proposed development, the anticipated benefits to the economy could be considered substantial, and significant weight can therefore be attributed to those benefits, both to the local and regional economy in terms of job creation and the retention of an established and strongly performing sector in the context of the local and regional economy, and as such those tangible economic benefits which could be directly attributable to this scheme, can again be afforded great weight. In this context, despite the conflict with the elements of the development plan, notably policy 11, the weight afforded to that could be more limited, particularly given the clear direction in paragraphs 85 and 87 of the NPPF, which afford specific support to the logistics sector and economic growth in that in particular. Following the rigorous assessments of visual impact of the proposed development, the harm to landscape character and visual amenity, other factors including built heritage, which of course needs to be given due and proper consideration and has been as part of these proposals. Despite there being some harm in terms of visual amenity and some less than substantial harm in heritage terms, it's those need to be balanced against the public benefits of the proposals, which, on balance, are considered to outweigh the development plan policy position and the harms established. Given the absence of technical objections to the proposed development in highways or other terms, the limited degree of harm to landscape character and visual amenity, and the less than substantial harm to any heritage assets in the area, it's considered that the substantial benefits of the scheme would outweigh any harms which may result. And as such, in light of the fact that this would represent a significant investment, and the degree of mitigation and the nature of the mitigation which would be provided as part of the proposals, on balance it's recommended that support be afforded to the officer recommendation, which is to recommend to the planning inspectorate that had the council been the determining authority, it would have approved planning permission subject to appropriate conditions and mitigation for other measures. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have 7 speakers on this subject tonight, so I'd like to invite the first speaker, which is Mr. Ian Scotland. No, I'm sorry. Sorry.
Thank you. Save Thrapston, Titchmarsh and the Upper Nene countryside and habitats have been working for over 3 years to ensure that the applicants and North Northants Council meet the standards required in this planning application. We have raised objections which have been factual and with evidence provided, yet the report before you completely ignores our work and instead parrots the submissions of the applicants' advisors. That report is not balanced. These plans are for 24-metre-high buildings that will sit on a raised development platform immediately visible from the A14 as you enter the county. The buildings will be higher than anything else on the A14 corridor and dwarf the neighbouring conservation village of Titchmarsh. Your local plan identifies Thrapston as a market town, not a growth town, and only small-scale, appropriate development should be considered here. There are said to be 3 levels of falsehood: lies, damned lies, and statistics. I'd highlight 2 areas where the applicant has manipulated statistics to benefit their argument. Economic need. Heavy reliance is placed on a report written by Savills specifically for this application to justify the urgent need for land outside of the adopted development plan. However, the report used discredited methodology and required statistical manipulation to avoid showing a fall in demand during last year. Your own planning policy department, who strongly recommended refusal of this application, advised that there was no credible case for additional deployment land outside of the agreed plan. There is no special need to justify a departure from the plan, and certainly no need to prejudice the advanced review of the plan through a premature decision. Traffic congestion, another key concern. This development will add over 2,000 lorries and 6,500 vans and cars to an already congested part of the road network. Nose to tail, that equates to 19 miles of vehicles going into and out of the development every day. Yet their traffic assessment anticipates a moderate improvement in local traffic conditions. We have evidence that the weakness in traffic surveys and forecast models and inadequacy of the road improvements offered. Major issues are initial surveys were taken during disruption of the COVID pandemic. Traffic volumes suggested by the applicant reduced by reference to existing users at Halden's Parkway. Use of a not for fit for purpose Northamptonshire strategic traffic model. Uniquely for North Northants, the road to this massive development will remain single carriageway. Minimal improvements to A605 roundabouts that won't allow traffic to traverse easily or safely. No one who uses these roads can understand why North Northants highways have not been more rigorous in their examination of the traffic impacts. This is an accident waiting to happen. Finally, the travel plan is impractical and cannot achieve the objective of modal shift away from private cars to public transport. The £1 million Section 106 agreement to provide a single bus route is a tick box exercise that will not be sustainable. Indeed, there is no break clause. Sorry, there is a break clause built.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to stop you there. But
North Northants Council will have.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to stop you there. And
How long did he get? How long did he get?
he's the officer.
Oh,
Okay. So, have we got any questions of clarification?
I'm happy to take questions.
Any questions? Yes, Councillor.
Yeah. Could I ask you, did you say that there's a likelihood of a single track road servicing this premises?
It's single carriageway currently, and it will remain single carriageway. There is no space to dual it. The roundabout between the roadway even between the A605 and the A14 is not going to be fully dualled. They're just not improving the roads as they should.
Any more questions? Clarification? Yes,
Thank you,
Councillor.
Chair. Could I just get some clarification on the Savills methodology? You mentioned that they're using an out-of-date methodology.
It was a discredited methodology.
Discredited. Could I just get more
the planning
clarification on that?
Sorry. The planning inspector had looked at the methodology previously and said it was not fit for purpose. It said basically it was saying that it was making assumptions about net absorption in particular, where there were assumptions that everything was for new development and not for people moving from old development into a new development. To be frank, the detail is a detail which is quite complex, but it is something that planning inspector has stated is not fit for purpose, and it has been relied upon by Savills within their methodology to explain why there is suddenly an extra demand, and higher rents, bigger boxes demand higher rents. The fact they're higher, they're taller, they're 24 metres, not 21 metres. Why should these developments be 24 metres high when others are only 21 metres high? This is going to be a very prominent high piece of ground, and yet they're still looking to develop at 24 metres. It just doesn't make any sense in a planning perspective, and in terms of spatial strategy and visual impact. It's just all wrong in the wrong place.
Right, thank you. Any more clarifications from members? Yeah, Councillor McLean.
Hi, I'd just like you to clarify, how did you obtain the numbers of vehicles that would be using the site?
It's in the application. And that's in that application. The one thing that's not been mentioned so far tonight is there's another application also on the outskirts of Thrapston, which is for a very similar size warehousing distribution centre, which is going to have very similar amounts of traffic. Now, the traffic assessments were supposed to be done on a cumulative basis, but that's not been mentioned to you at all tonight. You're completely...
Thank you for that
No, thank you.
clarification. Any more clarification questions? Okay, thank you for your time, and we'll invite the next speaker. Mr. Alan Mays.
Good evening and thank you very much. My name is Alan Mays. I'm Honorary Technical Secretary for the Northamptonshire branch of the Campaign to Protect Rural England. CPRE has opposed this application from the outset on a number of grounds which have been summarised in section 5.8 of this committee report. The application has attracted a large number of objections, in particular from parish and town councils and from those wishing to maintain the Northamptonshire countryside for present and future generations to enjoy. The proposal is a clear departure from the development plan, policies 3 and 11 of the JCS, and contrary to section 15 of the MPPF. These are all clear planning grounds for the refusal of this application. If, as members, you do not heed these policies, then you are setting a clear precedent for massively intensifying the growth of warehousing along the Nen Valley and the A14, to the extent that large chunks of the Northamptonshire countryside will be lost forever. The planning balance has been justified on the grounds of under-provision of suitable accommodation to create the supposed growth for the area. This is at a massive cost to the setting of nationally recognised wildlife designations in the Nen Valley. Future generations will not thank us for the impact of massive warehousings on the horizon, such as you've seen in the photographs today. The impact of such unwanted development is also clearly contrary to the tourism strategy for Northamptonshire, which seeks to promote Northamptonshire's countryside for its wide vistas and historic village settings, which all will be clearly under threat from these proposals. The fact that great weight has been put upon the evidence submitted by the applicant to support their claims that the area is in need of such development actually seeks to circumvent the normal democratic process where sites are allocated as part of the development plan review process, based on studies carried out by the local authority with full public consultation, and not as a submission to support a development on an unallocated site. The inspector, in her final report on the ENC local plan in 2023, at paragraph 169, agrees with the council's decision not to allocate any strategic employment sites, as the jobs target will be exceeded by over 3,000 jobs by 2031. The inspector goes on to say at paragraph 176 that given that the jobs growth target of the plan will be exceeded and that opportunities exist for B8 uses on existing and proposed allocated sites, there is no need to allocate further land for B8 uses. The economic climate has not changed to such an extent in 2 years, which is within the life of this application anyway, that these words from a government inspector can be set aside in favour of B8 development.
Thank you very much. And can I ask you to stay seated? And can we have any questions of clarification, please? No questions? Okay, thank you very much for your time. Could we hear from Kylie Chapman now, please? Okay. Could I ask you just to take a seat and? Okay. Yeah.
I am the most affected by this. My family will be made homeless. We have been in the village for generations. My dad farmed this exact farmland when I was a child. It is a fantastic place to raise our family, but also helps with my medical anxieties. This is an unallocated site in your plan. It is a strategic development, the tallest warehouses in Northamptonshire and taller than the Grade 1 listed village church. The assessment of landscape and visual impact being only moderate is grossly unreasonable. 4 24.5 metre high warehouses in open countryside will have a substantial and permanent visual impact. Substantial at both long and short distance, it cannot be hidden from view. The bunds will be a prominent alien feature and it will heavily contrast and disrupt the landscape. The ecological impact will be huge. Our drive is known as Jurassic Park Drive. Every day you encounter different wildlife. Staunch objections have detailed how all the surveys were poorly conducted and 12 acres of the site completely admitted. The hedgerows are habitats of principal importance, examples of the best in England. They include hedgerows that have been the parish boundary for hundreds of years, and all will be torn out. The most of the land is farmland. There's been no explanation why the best and most versatile soil on the site has been downgraded from the previous soil survey conducted by DEFRA. The potential list from contamination of watercourses due to the complete removal of the landfill site again appears to be completely ignored. NNC itself describes our Upper Nairn Valley Special Protection Area and Ramsar as the jewel in the crown of Northamptonshire. It's significantly more important than any SSSI, and we are lucky to have this internationally important area on our doorstep. Birds travel from thousands of miles every year, including a very rare hobby who often successfully breeds near our house. The SPA is failing. Population of the golden plover has plummeted by 97% since the site was created in 2011. This is bucking the UK trend and is solely down to site-specific pressures. You are the legal custodians of the SPA. Natural England has said the site is proved to be functionally linked. Almost 50% of the SPA population of golden plover have been recorded on more than one occasion foraging in these fields. The HRA has used old, inadequate and incomplete data. It has completely ignored the cumulative impact, and it's obvious to my family and everyone here that the development will bring adverse effect onto the SPA. The mitigation offered is desiry and doesn't meet with Natural England's criteria. Natural England haven't even seen and certainly haven't signed off on the legally required HRH document. The loss of this functionally linked land will put the status of the entire SPA at risk. The law means that you, as the competent body, if you're not certain beyond all reasonable scientific doubt there will be no adverse effect on the SPA, you cannot grant planning permission.
Okay, thank you very much. Have we got any questions for clarification? I'm sorry, no. Sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you very much. Could we have Jerry Hawkins next, please?
So, good evening, everybody. Thrapston Town Council has voted unanimously on every previous occasion to oppose this application as it is in the wrong scale, the wrong type, and in the wrong place. It has severe negative potential impact on the quality of life in our town and the residents, on our highways and the local natural environment. Thrapston is not a NIMBY town. The council has never opposed appropriate development, which is in the interest of the community and in keeping with the character of the town. Thrapston has built more houses already than the number targeted for completion by 2031. As has just been stated, the environment at Thrapston is very precious. NNC describes the area as the jewel in the crown. These areas are vital recreational spaces for residents and visitors to the town, in addition to being vital for wildlife. Our transport links are already heavily congested, leading to long delays and raised pollution levels. Anyone who lives in the town will question the credibility of any developer model which shows no impact of an extra few hundreds or thousands of HGVs on those roads a day with minimal change. This development is not consistent with local plans, with Northamptonshire's local plans. They recognise Thrapston as a historic market town and not as a growth town. Thrapston Town Council believes that any attempt to override the designations assigned in these plans outside the local plan process is fundamentally undemocratic. In this respect, how can Northampton's policy officers be ignored as they are being? Your own planning policy officers have strongly opposed this decision and recommended refusal. Your officers have severely criticised the so-called urgent needs analysis relied on by the report's author. This analysis is not objective evidence. It is prepared by people with a vested interest. Similarly, claims that the development will bring economic benefits are simply not credible. There is no available pool of labour to support strategic scale warehousing or to house incoming workers, so more traffic and more congestion. The existing warehouse companies in Thrapston cannot recruit sufficient workers already. Thrapston Town Council fully supports the work undertaken by Staunch. Throughout, they have been forensic, objective and professional. They are volunteers, and yet they include planners, ecologists and business analysts and are very expert. Yet the report's author hasn't seen fit to even summarise their objections.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I just... Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, I'm going to ask you to stop, please, because you've had your 3 minutes, and I'll ask you to stay there for clarification. Any questions? No questions? Okay, thank you very much for your time. Sorry. I'm going to have to ask you to... Thank you. Could we hear from Joe Gardner next, please?
Hello, I'm Joe Garner, one of the councillors for Thrapston Ward. At the heart of this planning application is a crucial legal judgment. Which is the superior planning policy document? Is it the North Northamptonshire Joint Core Strategy, or is it the National Planning Policy Framework as laid out in December 2024? Effectively, what we have here is a planning game of top trumps. What was the primary purpose of the National Planning Policy Framework? Quite clearly, in my opinion, its primary purpose was to instruct local authorities that they could no longer use local plans as a trump card to be played against planning applications which local councils did not approve of. From December 2024, it became necessary for planning case officers, for planning committee members, and for planning inspectors to not only consider local plans, but also to give due consideration to the National Planning Policy Framework when making planning decisions. However, in my opinion, the case officer in this particular planning application has misunderstood the primary purpose of the National Planning Policy Framework. The purpose of that latter document was not to hand developers a new trump card that they could play against local councils, effectively riding roughshod over local plans. And yet it would seem to me that the case officer in this instance is interpreting that framework document as a trump card which somehow completely invalidates the North Northamptonshire Joint Core Strategy. This is a crucial error of judgment which seriously undermines the legal basis of granting planning permission. Key to overriding the local plan in favour of the National Planning Policy Framework is the Savills report referred to by the case officer. But in section 521.53, it is noted that the methodology of that report was called into question by the planning inspector with regards to the Warrington local plan. In my opinion, the Northamptonshire Joint Core Strategy remains the legally superior and dominant policy unless there is overwhelming and incontrovertible evidence that supports the national planning policy framework. That overwhelming and incontrovertible evidence is simply not shown in this planning application. In light of my analysis, I respectfully request that the Planning Committee refuse this application.
Thank you very much. If you could just stay seated. And is there any questions of clarification? Councillor James.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, regarding the National Policy Framework, I'm not sure who this question should be addressed to, but great weight's been put on it. Obviously, we're being asked to consider this application as if we were refusing or supporting this application. But we've been told that biodiversity net gain can't be included in our consideration because it was past the date of the application. Likewise with England Active Travel consultation, they haven't been included on it. So I was just wondering the admissibility.
Yeah, I'm sorry, is this a question of clarification for Joe, or is this?
Yeah, I don't know if it's for the planning officer. So we weren't invited to ask questions of the planning officer when he finished speaking. I don't know if that will.
So just to confirm for members, the process is after each public speaker has finished, and in this case the ward councillor, you get the opportunity to ask any questions of clarification on what they've presented to you. So if you have any questions to put directly to the council on what they've said or anything that you wanted to confirm or understand in further detail, this is your opportunity to do so. Once all the public speakers have spoken, and the applicant has exercised their speaking rights, the officer will then do a further mop-up, and at that point questions of clarification can be put to the officer. So at this moment in the meeting is just to ask questions of the particular public speaker who's just presented to you.
Is there any clarification questions for the speaker? Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you,
Cheers.
Chair.
And could we have Councillor Wendy Brackenbury next, please? Thank you.
This is a joint statement from myself and Councillor David Brackenbury. David has written to the Planning Inspector sharing his objections to this application and therefore cannot sit in the committee to debate this item. We have a number of objections, but the fundamental point is that this is an entirely speculative development on a greenfield site in the open countryside. The site is not allocated in the Northants Joint Core Strategy, and the cumulative impact of this development and the neighbouring development proposed will have an adverse impact which will demonstrably outweigh the benefits of the scheme. The East Northamptonshire Part 2 local plan, adopted in December 2023, was found sound at inspection, and the inspector found that employment needs and logistics provision were adequate in the area. We appreciate all applications need to be considered on their merits, but it is also important to consider the potential adverse cumulative effects of two emerging schemes in the immediate area. Can I please draw your attention to 5.21 North Northamptonshire Council Planning Policy Team response? The Planning Policy Team has worked with the previous exec member for Growth and Regeneration and members, and policies have been out for public consultation before being adopted. It is important that due consideration is given to this part of the report, which gives enough reason to refuse planning permission. The Planning Policy Team objects to the proposals on the basis of conflicts with policies 11 and 24 of the North Northampton Joint Core Strategy, and that insufficient evidence has been provided as to how and why alternative available proposals that accord with the spatial strategy have been discounted. The proposed development will naturally have a very significant impact on the local area. The scale and massing of the buildings on the upper eastern edge of the Nen Valley will present a dominating appearance for many miles. The development will also have an overbearing impact on the village of Titchmarsh, which is close to the proposed site, and will also be detrimental to the upper Nen Valley gravel pits special protection area. The proposals are in conflict with policy 3 of the JCS, which deals with landscape character. This proposal is in the wrong place. It is unsupported by the local plan, and although the JCS is some years old, there is no current suggestion to allocate these sites in the emerging Part 1 plan, which NNC are working on now. The proposals are in conflict with criteria that were judged sound by the inspector when the JCS was improved. Northamptonshire are not afraid of sustainable development, and our delivery rates, both for housing and employment sites, speak for themselves. In reaching the decision to recommend planning permission be granted subject to conditions, we feel that report author has applied undue weight to the general provisions of unmet need contained in the revised NPPF and has applied undue little weight to the provisions of Northampton's local plans Part 1 and 2. The NPPF at paragraph 15 says that the planning system should be genuinely plan-led. Changes to the NPPF made recently do not detract from this point. This application would, if allowed, drive a coach and horses through this principle, and we submit that the committee should state that council should refuse the application on the ground set out above. In particular, please refer to the comments made by the planning policy team. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Buckenberg. Could I invite any questions of clarification to the Speaker? No questions? Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Can I just point out at 5.11? No, these are typos. Can somebody please look at them, because actually there are typos in the report at 5.1.1.
Okay.
And
thank you.
They'll be, if you look at them, they're quite clear.
Could we have Ben Taylor and Jack Adam next, please? You have 9 minutes between you, gentlemen. Yeah, 9 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Jack Caddo.
The 9 minutes is due to the adjusted additional time for third-party objectors.
It's to balance up the speakers for and against, like yours. Can we have police quiet? Would you like to carry on, gentlemen?
Good evening. My name is Jack Caddo, and this is Ben Taylor, and we both work for Newlands Developments, the applicant. Our planning application was submitted in February 2022, and following 3 years of rigorous consultation and stakeholder engagement, there are no technical objections outstanding from statutory consultees. The development partially comprises a former quarry site, and it adjoins the established Hordens Parkway industrial estate. It is located on the A14, which has been identified in the Council's logistics study and economic growth strategy as the most desirable freight and transport corridor within Northamptonshire. As acknowledged by the Council, there is a significant shortfall of industrial and logistics space across the area, and our development is well placed to assist in meeting that need at this strategic location. This is further evidenced by the support of our planning application from global logistics company DHL, who have a requirement along the A14 corridor. This will be a state-of-the-art logistics development, with all buildings constructed to the highest sustainability standards. Solar PV will be providing on the building's roofs, and EV charging infrastructure will be installed, future-proofed to respond to specific occupier needs. Despite what has been said tonight, the proposed buildings will be lower in height than those found on the existing Hordens Parkway industrial estate next door, and they will be visually screened with a landscape bunding and planting around the perimeter of the development. The cladding coloration has also been guided by an environmental colour assessment.
36% of this site will be dedicated to green and blue infrastructure, with an estimated 1.5 kilometres of new hedgerows and 1,500 new trees planted. Whilst not whilst not required to do so by policy, we are delivering 10% biodiversity net gain. And as agreed with Natural England, a further 22 hectares of land will be provided to support foraging habitat for wintering birds such as golden plover and lapwing. Over 7 million will be spent on a comprehensive package of highways improvements, which have been fully approved by both National Highways and the Local Highways Authority. We're also investing heavily in sustainable transport. A dedicated new bus service will be provided as part of these proposals, linking the site to Kettering, Wellingborough, Rushden, Earthlingborough and Raunds. New footway and cycleway connections will be created, including a 1.3 kilometre extension to the local greenway network. This scheme will generate real, long-term socio-economic benefits for North Northamptonshire. It will provide an estimated 2,700 high-quality jobs across a diverse range of roles. It will deliver 111 million GVA annually to the regional economy and over 4.1 million in business rates per year supporting local services. Employment and skills plans will be delivered for the construction and operational phases, and we have the support of Northampton College and University of Northampton. In summary, based on the professional views of the Council's planners, the proposals constitute sustainable development. Indeed, the logistics sector benefits from strengthened and explicit support in the NPPF that was published in December 2024. Any minor points that have been raised by consultees are mitigated through agreed measures and proposed conditions. This follows a process of rigorous scrutiny and constructive working between the applicant, LPA and consultees over more than 3 years. I wanted to finish by reading a quote from the Council's approved economic growth strategy from earlier this year that includes the objective, value and opportunity from logistics. Open quote. Looking ahead, the opportunities linked to high-end logistics need to be recognised and embraced more fully. School leavers in North Northamptonshire need to be better informed about the range of career opportunities linked to the sector, and more provision should be made to meet the sector's skills needs. Further innovation within logistics should be actively stimulated and encouraged, linking to a wider narrative of innovation across the strategy as a whole. As a sector, logistics is large and important, and the opportunities linked to it need to be harnessed to the full. Close quote. I just wanted to take the last bit of my time just to clarify the point about the Savills methodology. So the Savills methodology was endorsed through a British Property Federation report at the start of 2022 and was referenced in the government's Future of Freight strategy. It was shortlisted for an RTPI award for research excellence in 2022. It was recently endorsed by the inspector of the Hinckley National Rail Freight Terminal, DCO, who found the methodology sound. It's been used to support numerous proposed allocations in local plans of Crawley, Wigan and Bassett Law. And last but not least, it's been used as part of the West Midlands Strategic Employment Site study last year, and very importantly, as part of the South East Midlands Logistics study, of which North Northamptonshire Council jointly commissioned. We thank you for your time, and we hope that you will support the officer's recommendation to approve this important scheme for the area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any questions for clarification for the gentleman? Councillor Timms.
Yes, Chair. It relates to public transport and the proposals for bus routes. You spoke about some of the larger towns being connected. I'm not clear how that's going to be done effectively with extension of even the current bus routes, or are new bus routes envisaged? Now would they be provided?
Yeah, we have secured through discussions with the council's officers a series of options within the Section 106, one of which is a totally new bus route, others of which are extensions to existing routes, and we are working through the detail, but effectively that will coincide with shift patterns and also benefit the wider area through those links. Effectively, what we've sought to do is respond to some of the criticism that we had that we aren't linking to the key labour areas, and we brought that on stream to ensure that we link and brush past the sustainable urban extensions in North Northamptonshire.
Thank you.
Chair, through the chair.
Yeah.
I've got a quick question about what type of employment is there going to be at these premises, and how is that going to benefit the younger people coming through? And is any of this going to be automated, or is it going to be manual work?
Well, we have been doing a lot of work with the supply chain courses at University of Northampton. We actually helped them with one of their modules last year. And what it's clear is that the diversity of occupations within these facilities is, it's getting more diverse. There's a large office content. Typically, these warehouses have a 5 to 10% office space. And what some research that we've done recently shows is that there is more office floor space coming forward as part of warehouses than there is standalone offices. There are a plethora of opportunities available right from the warehouse floor. With increased automation, there are IT engineers, logistics fleet support. We call these job families, and there is a whole spectrum of opportunities for people. And I think a really important aspect of the warehouse market is that there is a sort of social mobility factor to this. A lot of the managers within warehouse buildings don't have a university degree, so you don't have to be a high flyer to excel and exceed and build your career path as you go along.
Sorry, just building upon what Ben said. So plot 1 has been applied for in full detail for DHL, and the office content of that building is around 25,000 square feet, which as a standalone office accommodation in North Northamptonshire would be very large. And occupiers such as DHL look to consolidate a lot of business functions within their warehouse space, almost make them headquarters-like functions. So, if you have engineers in there, HR, finance, all under one roof as part of the overall warehouse. So there's a real diverse range of jobs at a variety levels of skills available.
And could I also just make the point that for every 7 warehouse jobs that are created on-site, it does actually give rise to off-site jobs as well, such as the wider supply chain.
Okay. What potential benefits in job-wise, in job-wise, is it going to properly bring to the locals?
Well, typically, salaries in the warehouse sector are £4,000 higher than the average of all other sectors. So obviously, if people get paid more, there's more of a quality of life. So I think that there has been some research around logistics clustering in an area actually giving rise to a higher GDP. I think it's around about a 1.3% increase from logistics dense areas. So there is that ability to benefit.
Councillor Paulbrook.
Through the chair. You state that these buildings or this building is 24 metres high, and you say that it's lower than but we obviously have only seen a picture of it in a field, which could technically be any height. And you say it's lower than the other buildings around it. We have nothing in aspect. What's your roof height compared to their roof height?
So as part of our infrastructure works, we're creating a single development plateau that's actually sat down 10 metres from the existing level of Islington Road and Huntingdon Road. So it's actually a significant level difference between the two. So whilst we are going up to 24 metres as a maximum building height, and just that's key being maximum across the whole, it could well be that buildings are slightly lower than that. The actual overall height at 24 metres, based off our plateau level, is lower than the largest building on Haldens Parkway Industrial Estate, which is the Primark next door. So in terms of overall visual impact, it will sit lower than the Primark building.
Okay. So what's their building height roughly? You say yours is 24 metres, so theirs is.
I would imagine it's 14 metres.
Okay. So and you're going to go down 10 metres.
Yeah.
Yeah, our plateau level is sat down 10 metres.
From the road?
From the road, yeah.
From the road level?
Yeah.
Okay.
Any more clarifications? Okay, thank you very much for your time. Could I invite the officer to comment again now, please? Can I invite you to make any comments, please?
Is there any comments you want to make on what you've heard, or are we happy with? Is there any points of correction we need to make? Or clarification? So whilst the officer's looking at that, I'm going to use this opportunity to help him by just talking through what the recommendation is on the tabled update sheet that you received this afternoon. So you'll see in the tabled update sheet there is a tweak to the recommendation highlighted by the underlining in the text. What the recommendation is designed to do is is to identify what you would have done as a committee were this decision still to rest with you, and the recommendation on that front is that you would have granted planning permission subject to conditions and associated legal agreement. And the second point is we get delegated authority as officers to represent your view and to represent the council at appeal and to make any subsequent decisions that we have. The reason that the recommendation is written in this way with that flexibility inbuilt is that we need to be able to react to new information and to the negotiations that happen in the appeal. So what we're saying is we identify the conditions under Section 106 heads of terms in the papers before you, but we request flexibility so that we can react to anything that comes out of the appeal process and make any changes as necessary to protect the council's best interests. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I'll just a couple of things to come back on in light of clarification. Firstly, an omission on my part, just in the interest of clarification. Yes, there are two dwellings within the application area, one on the western side and one, as it appears much clearer in that diagram there, appears pink towards the eastern boundary. So apologies for that omission or reference to just a single dwelling within the site. That aside, I think the last two gentlemen have perhaps just clarified about the Savills methodology. The criticism of that in the Warrington local plan and inquiry, I believe, was due to some very specific circumstances which did not cause it to be discredited more widely, more due to the specifics of that. And indeed, I believe legal advice obtained on the part of the council suggests that the findings have been suitably robust and that there's no flawed methodology being employed there to inform the conclusions of the based on the Savills report.
Thank you,
sorry, just one further point. Did have they? I believe from policy colleagues, it was not within their. There was reference to the recent East Northamptonshire local plan. It was not within their gift to allocate additional land at that time. I understand from based on their advice. So, notwithstanding the findings of the inspector or their comments in relation to potential allocations, it was a Part 2 local plan where they were unable to make allocations, I believe, based on their advice from that. So their suggestion was not too much could be read into that particular point.
Thank you. I'm going to move the recommendation and ask for a seconder. Oh, sorry, was there any questions for clarification for the officer? Sorry, Councillor James.
Yes, Chair. I'll go back to my original question relating to the National Policy Planning Framework. It was amended in 2024. We've been asked to consider this application. We've been told that the biodiversity net gain and the England active travel consultees aren't admissible in effect, but I'm just querying what the cut-off date is for information. When is it right now? If those items haven't been included, is the NPPF 2024 December version? We are actually required to consider that, because a lot of weight has been put on that with regard to the move from sustainable development more towards this logistics and storage.
So if I'll attempt to answer that question. So I think what you're asking is what happens over time. So we've referred to the fact that we have a local plan, and then a more recent publication in relation to National Planning Policy Framework is a newer document, if you like, than our local plan. What we're saying is that the assessment starts with our local plan. The local plan has primacy. That is the development plan. That's where we start. But we have to then give weight to all the other information which goes, all the other material considerations which go into the assessment of the application before you. A significant material consideration is the National Planning Policy Framework. We also have to consider how new that is in relation to the policies in our local plan that we're assessing it against. So we have give significant weight to what the NPPF says. And in our balancing up exercise, we've started with our own policy, and then we've done the balancing exercise in terms of NPPF and the other evidence points which are detailed in the report before you. Over time, there are other requirements that come in or fall away in the planning process. So you've made reference to the biodiversity net gain. So at the time the application was first received by the council, the legislation was not in place to make it mandatory for there to be 10% biodiversity net gain. Therefore, we can't hold that as a bar that this application must achieve, as we would do if a new application was received today. However, notwithstanding that they don't have to meet that target, the applicant and the people who have spoken to you this evening have said that they have sought to provide a level of biodiversity and to try and meet that target, even though there's not a legal obligation upon them to do so. I'm afraid I can't answer the active travel point. I don't know if Mike has a comment on that. I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to comment on that one individually.
No, sorry, the active travel point I'm not entirely clear on. Was there... Could you elaborate a little more, please, Councillor? Is that?
I understood that they were a statutory consultee, but I think only since 2023, possibly.
I believe there may have been some representation, and they've certainly been taken into account as in the assessment. Their precise role, I'm not entirely sure, I must admit. Whether they're statutory or advisory, ultimately, what their precise role is in that. The comments certainly that they provided have been considered and given due weight, though, certainly.
Any further questions or clarifications? Okay, thank you very much. Now I'll move this recommendation. Ask for a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Scott Brown. So, NE-22-00-151 FUL, for the purposes of debate and in accordance with the Council's Constitution Rules 19.2 and 19.1, I will move the recommendation stated on page 6 that the committee resolve A, to instruct officers to advise the Planning Inspectorate that at Northamptonshire Council remained the determining authority, planning permission would have been granted subject to the conditions set out on the published committee report, committee update report, and section 106, a legal agreement to secure the items listed appendix 1 of the published committee report, and B, the authority be delegated to the Executive Director of Place and Economy and any officers nominated by them to conduct all activities necessary to engage with the current appeal on behalf of the Council. The delegated authority extends to altering, removing and adding conditions of obligations from those listed in the published committee report and committee update report, as deemed appropriate. So I invite members for debate.
Thank you very much, Chair. I guess I'll be the lucky one to start the debate. I guess for the floor, really, do we worry? Well, I personally worry that a significant amount of weight is being attributed to the economic benefits, particularly, and with the kind of items set out in the joint core strategy, would we be undermining that could potentially lead to further speculative development over a period of the future term of this joint core strategy, which I think is 2031, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, I guess I'll open that for the floor. But that's something that I particularly worry about with future onset of applications, and then we would then need to deal with those at face value, knowing that we've voted one particular way on this development.
Okay, thank you. Anybody like to come back with something? Councillor?
Yeah, I'm not too sure if I picked you up there properly, Councillor. I'm wondering if you're saying that there seems to be rather a weight put on the commercial and industrial benefits rather than the environmental and ecological benefits, or disbenefits, as the case may be. I'm wondering through the chair if that's what you meant. If I may, Chair.
Sorry?
It's just through yourself, I'd like to ask if I'm correct in my understanding of what the councillor said there.
I think that's correct.
That it's been very loaded in favour of commercial interests.
I think Councillor Williams, Councillor Colquhoun is just asking for clarification if that is what you were saying.
Yeah, I think just to simplify, I think from my perspective, it looks to me like a significant weight is being apportioned to the economic benefits of the development.
The reason I asked...
Balancing out the joint core strategy, sorry.
The reason I asked, Chair, is I fully agree with him. I think it's very heavily weighted in favour of developers, with very little consideration given to the local environment and the residents concerned and affected by it. And I think as a councillor, I think I have a moral obligation and duty to put the residents and constituents way far beyond commercial, possibly foreign interests. And with that in mind, Chair, I won't be able to vote in favour of this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Would anybody like to follow up on any of that? Councillor McLean?
Hi, I'd just like to reiterate what Councillor Callaghan has just said. You know, I actually have read the whole script of the 65 pages, and it just seems to me that the loss of amenity to the area outweighs the commercial benefits. I mean, there's been a few things that said on there about 2,500 jobs. Where are these jobs going to come from? If other areas of that type of business are having troubles recruiting. And then you've got this transport side where maybe you've got, I don't know, thousands and thousands of vehicles going on the A605, which is definitely not built for it. So that was my sort of thoughts on that as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Elgin, would you like to speak?
One of my main thinking is I'm a truck driver by trade, so I think of the transport logistics side. And the A14, I don't think has the capabilities of accepting a hell of a lot more traffic in that area. So I'm on the fence at the moment and trying to weigh up all the benefits and negatives. And I'm really struggling here to try and see a positive about this project.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my concern is about this developments being located in Thrapston, which is not identified as a growth town. We have growth towns, we have Kettering, Corby, Wellingborough, Rushden, have all been identified and have all got development sites there. And from a sustainability point of view, there's not the labour locally to Thrapston. There are population centres in these growth towns that can be used to provide the employment for these developments, and these developments also do have good road infrastructure as well. It's not just Thrapston's right next to the A14. All these other sites do have good connectivity with the road infrastructure. And I'm concerned about the amount of travel. We heard about the potential new bus service being provided by the council to Thrapston, but from my experience of using public transport, it's very slow, and there will be a propensity for people to utilise cars, which will impact on sort of net zero goals of the council and increase pollution, travel time, when it'd be better if these developments were located in the growth towns where people can have simpler journeys to work and are not travelling across the county.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments.
Through the chair, there's just another opinion one just came in my head just a minute ago, is the unemployment rate is currently rising within the nation, and if that's the case, are we going to have a shortage of staff wanting to work in new buildings, or is there going to be not enough? What's the question here? We've got to think logically whether this is going to benefit our area more than anything else.
Thank you very much. Anybody like to come back on that?
Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
I would question that. If there are retention and employment problems within the logistics warehousing at the minute, and where are they going to be finding these other 2,500 people who are allegedly going to be jumping into these jobs? Are they going to be travelling from outside or around outside the county, coming into here, creating even more congestion than the number of lorries that is going to be created on the smaller roads anyway? So I would question that as well.
Thank you very much. Anybody else like to come in? Yeah, carry on.
Yeah, not so much on the economic side, but more on the ecology side. We've heard reports about the Upper Nen Valley, the gravel pits being a special protected area, and also the Titchmarsh Meadows, special scientific interest. The phase one of this development is being built on the landfill, and in the report there were concerns about contaminated land and the large earthworks that are being considered, and possible effects with dewatering and effects on the water table. And I don't believe these have been properly considered or investigated. And there's talks of permits being required, but that hasn't been satisfactorily determined if it is safe to do these works with effects on potentially the water table. And also, as I think the golden plover has been raised, there are effects of the migratory routes and the existing habitats that are frequented by the wildlife in these areas. We've spoken about the established hedgerows. Now they're being offset by off-site or adjacent site ecological habitats being created, but they take a long time to establish. And the current habitats will be lost immediately with the developments. That's a concern of mine.
Okay, thank you very much. And is there anybody else that'd like to add anything? No? Okay. So So, NE-22-00-151-FUL, for the purpose of debate in accordance with the... Oh, sorry. Sorry? Are we done? Okay, yes, sorry, yeah, do apologise. Yep. So, just to make sure the committee is aware of what we're voting for, we are voting of page 6 of the update of the date paper, yep. Okay, so I will ask for a vote in favour. We have no votes in favour. Okay, I will ask for a vote against. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And anybody wants to abstain? Any abstains? No? Okay. Right, so I will say that the vote was lost.
Okay, so the outcome of that vote is that the recommendation before you fell. That means there is no motion. So what we need now is a motion to be put forward from the floor as to what it is you want the resolution of the committee to be. So does anybody want to advance anything they want to be put forward to a vote as the motion of the committee?
Councillor?
Do you want to go first?
Thank you, Chair. I'll just start on the basis of the joint core strategy. It's contrary to our own policy, and yeah, I would just worry significantly about going against that.
Anybody else?
My thinking is, if this is going to go ahead, irrelevant of our decision, if it's going to be taken out of our hands through going through other means, is there any way they can work with the residents to try and make something work?
So I think, so if I just provide clarity on what this stage of the process is. So what we need is the committee have voted and demonstrated that you are not happy with the recommendation that was put forward. So now we're looking to understand what recommendation would you agree to? What would be the decision of this committee? So the first point put forward by Councillor Williams is that the development is not in accordance with the council's adopted local plan, and that's been identified as a possible reason for refusal. We will revisit that in a second and provide advice. What we need to understand is, are there any other reasons for a refusal that the committee would like to put forward for consideration before you go to a vote?
Councillor?
It would be nice to see more understanding of context from the A14. So, for example, like a full-on elevation, but from like where Primark is, DSV, and how the full relationship between the road and all those buildings are actually interacting with each other.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we can't accept them at the moment, so thank you. We can't accept them at the moment, so... Unfortunately, it's got to be the committee that have to put the motion forward, okay, for the refusal. Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry. It's for the members of the committee to put forward the motion on refusal, right? So we can't accept anything at the moment, okay? So thank you. Yeah. But we can't take them at the moment, so thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Councillor?
Yeah, Chair, I would also include for consideration insuitability of the road structure, the roadways in and out.
Okay.
Also, personally, I don't know if I'm wrong, I'm not no expert, but I'm not very convinced that the protection of the habitat is sufficient either.
Okay. Councillor?
Sorry, yeah, Chair. Basically, I've got exactly the same view. I mean, that particular junction through there is an absolute nightmare. And I go through there regular, and the lorries through there, that would just be a nightmare. That needs to be sorted out if that's going to go forwards.
Can I just make one more comment, Chair? But it is the road, A14 structure itself needs a major upgrade around that area down towards Cambridge and everything. Because if you go down by Duxford Airfield, down there it's absolute medlem during rush hour, and it's if it takes another couple hundred trucks on that road, it won't be suitable. And that's going from a truck driver himself saying this.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, I work in one of these buildings, and I think they've slightly over-exaggerated the amount of jobs that are going to be created.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So, sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to say that two additional ones, really mainly around the visual impairment of the site. So, again, relating to Councillor's comments about the context between buildings and what that we heard earlier about the views of the countryside being the jewel in the crown. I guess is my point, and we don't know the context of what those views look like. In addition to that, we've got the historic context as well, that where there was a comment from Historic England about the significance of the area. Be worried about the context of what the impacts would be on that.
Councillor?
Yes, a couple more items is about the provision of jobs we've got coming through with the existing planned developments. I understand that's adequate to meet North Northamptonshire's employment allocation, and moreover with what's planned through the pipeline. So it doesn't necessitate additional developments in out of area growth zones. And also about the sustainable development. I think it's contrary to the joint core strategy about locating these developments away from growth towns where there is a body of labour to use for employment in these factories, warehouses.
Anything else, Councillor?
Just quickly, how close is it going to be to this lady's house? Because, I mean, I know nobody's got a right to a view as such, but they do have a right not to look at an actual wall, to be fair.
Okay.
I didn't know how...
No, sorry. No, sorry. And anybody else? No? Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, so what we have there is we have 6 headings for key areas of concern, which we now need to flesh out into possible reasons for refusal, which can then go forward as a motion upon which you can vote. So the first one is the highlighted concern that the development represents a form of, the proposal represents a form of development which is contrary to the core strategy. You've also in your debate highlighted that it undermines the spatial strategy because it represents growth at a market town rather than a growth town. And you've also made reference to the fact that it's about providing employment opportunities away from jobs markets. So that's the sort of summary I have for the first reason for refusal. What you need to consider in that is what is it that you've heard this evening, which means that you are giving less weight to the MPPF in terms of the government's guidance to look at the locational need and the operational need of the logistics providers, and also the fact that you have a named user for the first part of the application demonstrating the need, their may argue that that demonstrates the need for this development coming forward.
We have other allocated zones for development for this type of use. So in my view, it's not that this is the only allocated site in the boundary, and therefore.
So I think so my goal in this process is not to debate every point with you, but to try and make sure that you're making an informed decision and that you have given due regards to the evidence before you in terms of the report and the speakers and everything you've heard this evening. So in terms of what is said in the planning policy comments detailed in the report, the concluding 2 paragraphs highlight that this is not a form of development which is supported by the aspirations of the policy, and that the applicant has failed to demonstrate that these developments cannot be accommodated on other allocated sites. So that's the conclusion that your policy officers came to. What you need to consider against that is that you have a named user, which is identified on one part of the site which is coming forward, and you also have evidence which has been put forward by the applicant to say that they feel that there is a need. The Savills report is a form of evidence. It is not the only point of evidence, it is a form of evidence which you have to give some weight to. How much weight you give to it is up to you, but you have to balance these factors when concluding whether the harm of not following the policy is sufficient to mean that you are outweighing all the other evidence you've heard this evening. Okay. The second item was about visual impact. So the initial comment was about the visual impact that the development would have from the roadway, but then there were further comments later on about the visual impact on the wider countryside and the visual impact. There was also a reference to heritage, but I've put that into a separate heading. So visual impact, the impact of these buildings in terms of what you can see and on the surrounding environment was a concern that was raised. If we go back to the presentation that you saw, there are computer-generated images which are put forward which demonstrate what key vantage points look like at the moment, what they are imagined to look like with zero mitigation, so that's where the buildings go onto those images, and then what they would look like in a period of, is it a 15-year cycle, Mike? Yeah, so after the bunding and 15 years for the mitigation to be established, what that would look like. And you may recall that in many of those images, the buildings are demonstrated to be screened by the mitigation which is put in place by the planting. So I need you to confirm what it is about that visual impact which is causing you concern, having seen that evidence that you've seen this evening.
So I think my concern is that at the moment, let's just say you're driving down the A14, even as just one example, at the moment you've got a view across that whole countryside. Alternatively, if you're in Titchmarsh, you've got a view across that countryside, which ultimately meets the horizon. Although that, you know, it could be debated whether or not the trees do screen the warehouse, ultimately that pulls back the horizon line. You can't quite see. You know, you're removing skylight essentially from that horizon view.
Thank you. So I will re-summarise these in a few minutes.
Could I be able to add on to that?
Please
CGIs, they can be very, very exaggerated at times. And sometimes 3Ds and stuff like that don't give you a full visual understanding of what's actually happening there. Sometimes you actually require a full-on set like elevation, so you understand what's the context of the roof heights and how they are actually interacting with the actual the additional context, like the countryside, for example.
So the challenge we have there is about the evidence that's been put forward and how that's been assessed. So the environmental statement would have had a full landscape and visual impact assessment which has been considered and gone through. So we have, as part of the suite of documents supporting the application, had a full methodology to identify what are the sensitive receptors, so what viewpoints need to be considered, and then those montages and others would have been generated for all of those viewpoints. So I'd urge caution from saying that you haven't had the information on particular viewpoints. I think I would steer you to think about what is it about introducing the development together with the bunding and the vegetation associated with the bunding in these areas. So the first point about foreshortening the distance to the horizon, if you put something where there is nothing, you're always going to foreshorten the distance horizon. So that's you can't argue that point. That's sound. The other point that was made by one of the people making a representation to you is that the bunding itself would be an alien feature and the vegetation would be an alien feature because it's not there at the moment. So it's trying to understand what the concerns are of the strategy which has been put forward. The combination of digging down 10 metres into the ground to minimise the height, plus having the bunding, plus having the vegetation on it, is all designed to screen those buildings to minimise their impact. Now, you may feel that that's not going to be successful, but I need you to tell me why you don't think that's going to be successful. What's going to happen which you're not happy about?
Councillor?
Yeah, on policy 3 of the joint course strategy, it talks about safeguard and where possible enhance important views and vistas, including skylines with the development and layout. Clearly we're changing the view from Titchmarsh on this, so that could be regarded as a reason, though whether it's I'm sure people will argue that it's an important view from Titchmarsh.
Thank you, Councillor.
Sorry, I was just writing down. So what you're identifying there is it fails to safeguard those important views from the adjacent village of Titchmarsh, and that's the concern that you've identified there.
Thank you, Chair. Another point, I can't remember the item in the joint course strategy, so I'll let you dig that out. But there, it talks about where possible making improvements to the existing network and not detracting from them. And that can come under whatever category you'd like to discuss there, whether it be, what my understanding is, traffic, energy, usage, all those things. So although there are no objections from highways, we've heard today, in my view, that there are some significant issues with the traffic. But then in addition to that, we've not seen anything about the, like how we'd improve the energy grid in this, what's the pull on power, any renewables to significantly improve.
Okay, let's take that two by two, because you've raised a couple of things there. So let's do highways. So there was concern raised that the road network surrounding the development was unsuitable for the development that's been proposed, and there was several comments on that same theme. So we do have colleagues here in attendance from the highways team to answer technical questions. My starting point for guiding you in this regard is you have had a report detailing that there is no objection from your own highways team. There is no objection from National Highways or Highways England or whatever they're called today. There's also other adjacent highways authorities who've commented on this application and have no objection. So there are no technical objections to this application on the basis of highways. If you put forward a reason for refusal based on highways, we will have to seek to try and defend that in the appeal scenario, and we will need evidence to do so. We would have to have a technical expert to come along and demonstrate what the impact is on highways. We can't use our own in-house expertise because they are satisfied that the scheme is acceptable in highways terms. So if you have significant concerns about highways, we need to understand what it is about the expertise that you've heard and has been referenced in the report which is not satisfying you at this point.
Councillor?
Yeah. I'm no expert on transport or highways, of course I'm not. But I don't think that my understanding of a traffic route is less than the understanding that a so-called expert who is being paid by someone else has. So, just to simply assume that they're right and we're wrong, not necessarily the case. Now, for me, if there are 30, 40 wagons going up and down a single track road over a 8, 10, 12-hour period. That's heavy going. And it's not a suitable road, I would suggest. And I don't think there's a great deal of science here.
Okay, so I would disagree with the last point. I believe there's a lot of science, and I'm going to invite my colleagues to, he's shaking his head, but I'm still going to invite him to comment on that in 1 second. The issue is that there are several perspectives which have been put forward on traffic. Only one of them is the representative perspective of the applicant. The others is the representative perspective of your own paid officers employed by you as the council and officers employed by adjacent councils and adjacent highway authorities. So we have multiple technical input to this application assessing the transport impacts, not only those representing the applicant who may or may not have a vested interest, but those who represent the authority and have a vested interest in protecting the needs of the authority. You've raised concerns about the adequacy of the road network and also about the methodology which has been used. Is there any comments you can make on the methodology which has been used that may support members?
We're satisfied with the methodology used. That's all we can say. It meets...
Sorry, can we have quiet, please?
The modelling used meets national standards regarding the standards that are necessary in terms of the data used. It locally validates to acceptable standards. It's been checked by multiple different consultants acting for ourselves, but also for other authorities, as you've stated. It is acceptable in that context.
Sorry, can I just say, these lorries are all going to come down, or all the traffic to it is going to come down this Huntingdon Road, yeah? And then they're going to get to this roundabout, and they're going to turn left, and they're going to go through this little single bit of road here, where I sit on lots of occasions, to reach the A14. I mean, that's going to be a lot of lorries. I already sit in that traffic, plenty enough.
Is there a summary we can provide of the mitigations which underpin the reasoning that we came to the conclusion that there is no transport, there is not sufficient severe transport harm to warrant a refusal on behalf of the officers?
In the first instance, I'm not quite sure what you were pointing to in terms of which directions you were. So apologies, Councillor, in that respect. In terms of a summary of mitigations, based on the evidence provided, the mitigations are sufficient to offset the impacts that the development has identified to be necessary. There are substantial and significant improvements on some elements. Others may disagree that they are significant. They are entitled to those opinions. The details have been checked and considered by our consultants and found to be sufficient in this case.
Okay, so as I said, the purpose of this section of the meeting is not for me to debate each individual item, it's just to make sure that as you consider the reason for refusal that you are sculpting to therefore put forward to vote on, that we've made sure that you're aware of the implications of what you're saying. So the key point here is to make sure that we have recognised that we will struggle as an authority to find technical expertise to support a reason for refusal on highways in an appeal scenario on the basis that our own expertise in-house has not found this to be a concern, and that the methodology which has been used and validated is a common national methodology which will be used by all. So I just have to urge caution with that as we proceed. The next...
Sorry, you cannot speak. Sorry. Can you please stop speaking? Can you please stop speaking? Sorry? Right, if you do not stop speaking, we've got to stop the meeting. Okay then. I'd rather you just let us talk and, you know, debate it and come up for a conclusion. Okay, so if you could let us get on with it, that'd be really kind of you. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay, point 4 was the protection of habitat. So I can't read my own handwriting, but the concern was that the development is not going to provide adequate protection for habitats, and that you were dissatisfied with what you'd heard in terms of what's been put forward, how this is going to protect the ecology of the area. We have, so what, if you put that forward as a reason for refusal and carried it forward, what you are in effect saying is that you disagree with the advice you've had from the expertise that the council has engaged to review all the evidence that's been put forward, and you're also not supporting the position put forward by Natural England. So the technical advisors who've gone through all the ecology information are happy. We have also received information, as was highlighted in the officer's presentation very recently, from our expert advisor, which addresses the supplemental document that was put forward by Staunch late in the process. So we have considered all of those elements, and it is felt that the approach which is being put forward in terms of the mitigation on site plus the linked mitigation off site is sufficient to ensure that the impacts of this development would be offset and would give adequate protection for the ecology and the protected areas adjacent to it. So what we need to understand, if you're going to put forward as a reason for refusal, is what it is about that information, those technical assessments which have been done on your behalf, which you are unhappy with or not convinced by at this moment in time.
Sorry, you cannot talk. We're in debate at the moment, so. Councillor?
Yeah, a problem I have here is, in responding to that, is one, I don't know who the authors of the original report were, and I don't know who commissioned this. So it's very difficult to not to have a bit of a biased approach to it. So I'm going to err on the side of caution with this one, and suggest that, yeah, we haven't mitigated well enough. Because I think there's a bit of guesswork and a bit of some of it's disingenuous. Sorry, so I'll err on the side of caution or danger, whichever.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I'm going to need to put a vote forward to extend the meeting. Who's in favour of extending the meeting? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
So just to clarify, we're approaching 10 p.m, which is the guillotine for our council meetings is of 3 hours. So as we're now approaching the limit of that 3 hours, the chair is asking if you would vote to extend the meeting to conclude the discussion of this item.
Do we have the vote? Do we have the numbers? Can we just have the cards put up just so we can see clearly? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, we can carry on.
Chair, unfortunately on that matter, as it's coming 10, due to working time directive, so I have to leave.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we have two final headings for me to run through, and then we will look to get to the vote. So the fifth one was, there was a concern expressed that there's a lack of evidence of the jobs, or the jobs that we put forward as part of this proposal. So, obviously, it's a subjective matter. How many jobs do you think are going to come forward? However, what you are saying, if you refuse this application on the basis of a lack of jobs, is that you are not giving, that you do not agree with the evidence that's been put forward. So that evidence is not only the understanding of the technical assessments on a wider scale. So we've heard about the Savills report. We've also heard about the Iceni report, which is referenced in your planning policy comments. In addition to that, you have a named user as part of this application who's written a letter in support of the proposal, who is saying that they need this development to come forward for them to continue and to provide employment. So by saying that you are concerned that the jobs identified will not come forward, you are saying that you do not agree with that evidence that's been put forward by that existing employer and that named user who wants to stay in this area. The other factors that you need to think about is reference was made to the fact that there is sufficient jobs being provided to meet the jobs target in the East Northants Part 2 local plan. You can give some weight to that, but you are saying that those jobs, in your mind, that provision of those jobs outweighs the fact that any new jobs might be created, as has been put forward by the applicant.
Councillor?
Yes, I feel a bit qualified now to speak on this one. As you say, it is subjective. I spent most of my working life in the trade union movement and lecturing in industrial relations, so I'm fairly knowledgeable. And I know enough people in the business to get a very good report drafted to favour what I'm saying. And I'm saying that you would not, out at Thrapston Titchmarsh, you would not fill that warehouses of that size with enough workers. You just wouldn't do that. And what we've seen, what experience has taught me in Quarry, working as a trade unionist over the years, when we had places like Solway Foods, etc., we couldn't fill them up. We were bringing people in from Leicester, Luton, and even from London to staff these places. And we're bringing in coach loads. Now, how on earth are they going to get people out to Titchmarsh for 12-hour shifts? It's not going to happen. And they're not labour intensive either, a lot of these jobs.
Okay, thank you. Oh,
I have to
Thank
agree
you, Chair.
with.
Sorry.
I have to agree with my fellow councillor, Mr. Colquhoun, because I work in a food factory, and we're having to ship. We're having to rely solely on agency, and the agency are bringing people from Leicester every day. So we can't fill the jobs that we have in Quarry here. So I very much doubt in a little rural place like Thrapston that they're going to do it.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think I made a point previously, I think it comes from Northamptonshire's planning policy team, about there are enough jobs in the pipeline to satisfy the requirement for Northamptonshire's employment targets, and allowing this development to go on this site is unnecessary, and the harm consequences don't necessitate it. We seem to be having enough jobs coming through from current developments and proposed developments.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor.
Okay, and then the last point that was raised was about the impact on the designated heritage assets. So in planning, we talk about harm to heritage assets. And where something is less of substantial harm, that's a technical phrase, in layman's terms it means a level of harm which is less than demolition. I'm looking at my colleague who's going to either shake or nod his head as I go along. And so where something is of less than severe harm, it's classed as less than severe harm, and therefore what we have to do is we have to weigh that against public benefits. So what you would be saying if you were refusing this application on the basis of the impact on the heritage is insufficient public benefits to outweigh the level of harm to heritage assets. What I would say as a global point, and I'll come back to heritage in a second, is when we look to refuse a planning application, it's not about how many reasons for refusal we have, it's about how strong those reasons for refusal. Now, we've not heard in the debate that we had much about particular concerns you had on particular heritage assets or the impact upon them. You've already got a reason for refusal that you've talked about in terms of the visual impact from the roadway, in terms of the wider countryside, the foreshortening of the horizon and the impact on Titchmarsh. When you were having that debate, you didn't reference any particular heritage location. You can include a reason for refusal which says that you do not think that the public benefits outweigh the impact on the heritage. But when we get into an appeal scenario, we will have to identify A, what is the heritage asset that you feel is impacted on, and B, why is it that the public benefits coming forward with the applicant are not sufficient to outweigh that level of harm, particularly if that level of harm is low. So I would urge caution with going forward a reason for refusal on the basis of heritage. It might be that the reason for refusal you've already talked about in terms of the visual impact of the built form of the buildings themselves might be sufficient to articulate the concerns that you have.
Yeah, sorry, we can't. We're still debating, sorry.
Apologies, Chair. Could I just make a point just back on the previous point regarding employment? Has DHL submitted, in their view, what they will be able to employ in their unit? At the moment, we've just got the Savills report, which is kind of, I guess, pie in the sky. But is DHL, if they're the applicant, have they actually told us what they're planning on employing, to give some tangible numbers?
Can we just have a bit of quiet, please?
So I think if we can try and check in the background. So there's two things we'll try and check for you. So there is a letter that was submitted by DHL, so we'll see if we can find that. There will also be, so this application, if you like, is in two parts. So there's the part for the named user, which is full, and then there's the setting the outline consent for the rest of the land. There will have been a jobs assumption put on the application form as well, and we'll see if we can provide you with that information. Okay, so we were just talking about the next step of the process in terms of how we go to a vote. So whilst we're finding that information in relation to the reason for refusal 5 that you put forward, can members confirm to me whether you wish to proceed with the reason for refusal related to heritage impact? Let me ask it a different way. Is anybody keen to proceed with an reason for refusal related to heritage impact? Okay. Okay, so we will still endeavour to find that information because that is key to your consideration of reason for refusal 5. What I will do once we have that information is I'll go back through, I will seek to summarise as best I can each of the reasons for refusal. What we're looking for is what is it your concerns are, what the planning harm is, and then we are proposing that you then go to a vote on all reasons for refusal at the same time. So you're making one vote which is for all the reasons for refusal if you're happy with the wording that's being put forward. So the process that will be followed, once we've had clarification on the job numbers, I will put forward a summary of the 5 reasons for refusal that we've outlined. We will then need a proposer and a seconder for the reasons for refusal that I will outline to you. Once we have a proposer and a seconder, if we have a proposer and a seconder, you then have an opportunity to debate those reasons for refusal, if you wish to do so. And once that debate has concluded, then that will be put to the vote. So that's the process we will follow in a few moments' time. So members, hang on, if you leave the room, you cannot take part in the vote. Okay. So as fun as it is watching another man read, I'm going to start the process and we'll see whether we get somewhere. So the first reason for refusal. So the development is contrary to the council's adopted core strategy and the committee does not consider that the evidence put forward in terms of the need for the development has adequately addressed the impact there would be by allowing a large-scale commercial development in a market town away from a growth town, and words to that effect. Have I captured the core there? Okay. Second reason for refusal. The proposed mitigation of the development, including the 10-metre reduced plateau, the bunding and the vegetation put forward as mitigation, would not adequately address the visual impact caused by the development, in particular the foreshortening of the horizon taken in views from the A14 and the adjacent countryside, and the impact on the adjacent of views from the adjacent village of Titchmarsh. I've got some nods for that one. Highways. Notwithstanding that the committee is not satisfied that the mitigation being put forward by the development the measures being put forward by the development would adequately mitigate the impact on the highway network and highway users. The committee are not satisfied that the approach to the mitigation of the ecological impacts of the development put forward through the suggested conditions and the adjacent mitigation land would adequately address the concerns about the impact on protected species. Okay. Have we got anywhere?
I just wanted to double check that I hadn't missed a reference. I can't. There is no direct reference to the job creation associated with phase 1 in the DHL letter of support. I've not been able to locate that elsewhere in terms of direct job creation. The economic benefits have been referred to are more in terms of the local economy in the broader sense, rather than in terms of direct job numbers.
Okay, and then the last element in relation to jobs. So the committee give weight to the fact that the job numbers anticipated by the East Northants local plan for the period up to for the planned period are due to be met without this development coming forward. The committee have concerns that the jobs less weight has been given to the job numbers identified in relation to this development on the basis that the development is located away from a growth town and away from a location where it will be easy for prospective operators to find staff and the people that they need to employ. Okay.
Sorry, through the chair, if I may. Perhaps also that it's not the most skillful of type of work. It doesn't require really the most skilled type people.
So the presentation you heard from the applicant highlighted two things. One is it talked about the variety of employment activities within the logistics sector, and it also identified that they suggested there was evidence to show that many of the uses come forward have a high degree of office space and office uses as businesses co-locate the different jobs that they have. And there was reference made to job families, the idea that there's lots of different types of roles coming forward. So given that you've had that evidence before you this evening, what is it that leads you to believe that these would be low-skilled jobs?
I missed a part of that because my hearing thing had gone. We're talking about DHL. It's not, they don't deal in rocket science and stuff like that. They deal in fairly not unskilled, altogether unskilled, not highly skilled jobs. They also don't, contrary to what the two gentlemen said earlier, they're not great payers in relative terms. So they tend to have a fairly transient workforce, which of course adds to employment staffing issues. I don't know if I've addressed what you said there, Alex, or not.
So I think what you're suggesting is that you did not agree with the information put forward in support of the application about the variety of job roles that may come forward, and there is a concern that these may be primarily lower skilled jobs.
Lower skilled jobs, yeah.
Excuse me, Chair.
And of course, it's only a very small part of the site that's even talking about having jobs at this moment in time.
Thank you.
Okay, so to confirm, my suggestion... Councillor Williams.
Apologies. I think just to follow up for that, the answer is we don't know, because I think DHL probably could have had an opportunity to explain a little bit more about the employment blend, not just the blend, but employment numbers. I mean, I appreciate there are two hybrid applications running concurrently, and I appreciate that some form of methodology needs to be employed for the outline planning, but for the DHL unit, that's DHL know what they need in that unit, I would assume, and we don't know.
Okay. So what we've got, and I'll need a proposer and second in a moment, is if we look at your update sheet. Originally, the recommendation was Part A was recommended that you would have granted, so that effectively switches. So Part A, the recommendation is you would have refused, and you would have refused for those 5 reasons that we have spelt out. and officers will support those reasons with the appropriate reference to policies within the development plan. Part B remains that we would still be asking as officers for delegated authority to represent the council on appeal, and we would still be asking for flexibility. So, notwithstanding the points that you put forward this evening, we will need to engage with our legal advisors as to how we can proceed as a council to fight the appeal which has already been lodged. We would request as your officers the flexibility that where we receive legal advice or input to indicate that we will not be able to substantiate a reason for refusal, and there may be implications for the council, possibly financial implications for the council, that you provide flexibility for officers to agree to vary, alter or remove any of those reasons for refusal where it's necessary to do so to protect the council's wider interest. So that would be part B of the recommendation, very similar to how it has already been laid out to you in the update sheet. Is there a proposer?
Councillor McLean. A seconder? Councillor Gordon Dunsmore.
So you have now an opportunity to debate that motion, including anything I've just said about the flexibility required.
Any comments, Councillor? Just straight to the vote, yeah?
Chair, we're just finalising the wording of the recommendation that will be recorded in the minutes. If you just give me one moment, please.
Okay.
So if I can just explain to members what's happening. So that's fine. So what we're doing is we are clarifying what the recommendation is so we can read it back out to you. As you'll have seen by the process that we've had to go through this evening, it's difficult in the moment on the hoof to have fully formed and robust reasons for refusal. So what we can do to make sure we get every opportunity to capture the essence of what we've talked about here, but make sure we make the right reference to policy and have the most robust wording, is you can delegate the final wording of those reasons for refusal to officers in consultation with the chair. And what that's designed to do is to make sure we can go away, capture those reasons for refusal, write them out longhand, and then we seek to agree with the chair of the committee that they are a true reflection of the debate that you've had this evening.
Sorry, you can't leave the room at the moment because we're going to do the vote. Oh, sorry. Right, committee. I think we're ready for a vote. I'm just going to tell you the amendments and guidelines. So we're going to instruct officers to advise the planning inspectorate that had Northamptonshire Council remained the term determining authority, planning permission would have been refused based on the reasons for refusal debated at the committee. The final wording to be delegated to the Executive Director of Place and Economy in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair. Part 2B, the authority be delegated to the Executive Director of Place and Economy and the officers nominated by them to conduct all activities necessary to engage with the current appeal on behalf of the Council. This delegated authority extends to altering, removing reasons for refusal as determined appropriate. Can we have a proposer? And can we have a seconder? Okay. And can we have vote and can we see cards, please? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Right. So the vote is carried. Can I see if there's any people that were against it or abstained? No? Okay. So the vote is carried. So on that basis, I am now going to be closing the meeting at 10:27. Thank you very much.